Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're playing a PortalCraft deck. This one is a more artifact based deck that doesn't 100% rely on Omen of Destruction, but is a nice extra just to kind of finish off games a lot of the time. I like having it as a good option. Pretty much any Portal deck, definitely worth running it, even just as a 4-drop 1/4 Bane. It's still a reasonable card, so we're going to get right into this and check it out. So our first matchup is actually a Portal mirror match, so Portal versus Portal, you can't go too wrong there. We are going second, which makes things a little trickier a lot of the time, although it does mean if we go for the Omen line of play, we could potentially have it a reasonable amount earlier. And mechanization, not too bad as a start. But nothing really else to play, so that's a little disappointing. I did decide to aim for the top end cards, since it looks like we're probably going for the more artifact edge here instead of going for the Omen, since we didn't really get it in our opener. So I think favouring the potential artifacts is just going to be a little more beneficial to us long term, especially going into this kind of matchup. Looks like they're playing a reasonably similar line at the moment. Just dropping whatever they kind of can to the board. Well, we kind of just take them out. That's all we can really do at the moment. They are going for Omen of Destruction, but they're doing it a little early, which does mean we get a chance to obviously kill it off, so that's not really a problem. Nicaris actually is a pretty good option to do so. And they also have a second mechanization, which means we're going to be able to get even more cards into our deck. Which, since we already have Deus Ex Machina, is actually fairly advantageous for us. And just that couple of damage to face. Biofabrication and Acceleratium, interesting. Not a big surprise, just an interesting line. So looks like they're definitely probably going for their own Deus Ex Machina next turn. We can't actually play ours next turn, so that's a little disappointing, but I did want to slam a bunch of Radiance into the deck, since we are going to go for our Deus Ex as soon as we can. I would like it to be next turn, but potentially might be a bad option. But since they're going for theirs, it might actually be fine. They do have to trade with this. You can't really afford just to leave it up, it wouldn't be very good. But we're not in Resonance, which is a little bad. It's going to put us a little bit behind, but we have still got a couple of decent artifacts. We have got the Hamlin, Acceleratium, so honestly, it's not the worst possible situation to be in right now, which is quite good. Mecha Wing Swordsman, not really a problem. And a Magisteel Lion. All low drops that aren't really going to cause any issues for us, and forcing out the Hamlin Evo is definitely good for us. That's a pretty ideal trade right there. So we can pretty much ignore Omen, since we don't have any Evos. And there was no point holding onto them in this match. We definitely wanted to be a little more aggressive, since we are going more artifact heavy instead. And I do decide not to go for the Resonance again, mainly just because we've got a Radiant, we've got a Puppet now, Hamlin, we've got so many good options that we don't really need to push that. And we're actually ahead as far as deck goes, so the odds of them decking themselves out become a little bit higher. There is the Entity, not going to do much in this match, since we're not going for any big kind of destruction cards. This time aiming for a more aggressive with the Radiance and the Ancient Artifacts. And now we just kind of take out everything else. Since we are in Resonance, we're pretty well set. A little bit of puppet value, make them draw some more cards. And leave up a nice board. Fortunately we didn't draw any artifacts, that's a little bad, but we do have a Granblue, which gives us a chance, and Miriam. Now we have a decent control with the meta production for our Resonance, so that's going to be extremely valuable. There's their own Miriam. They're going for, of course, artifacts in their deck. No surprise there, since they are running a little low on cards. And that was actually ideal. Getting the ancient artifact is going to help us massively in this match. Especially since it's effectively costing nothing to play those. So now we have a very easy line of play. We can pretty much stay out of resonance for the moment. We don't need to be into that, since we can set this board up nicely, and we do have a Radiant and another Acceleranium to play next turn. So there's no real reason to put ourselves at risk. The only real dangerous part becomes these Radiant artifacts that our opponent can play, as of course them going face could be pretty devastating. Since they did go for 4 damage, it looks like they're trying to set up for the potential of a double Radiant next turn. It's kind of the only card that would be a big downfall for me. But we're going to, of course, do our best to combat this. One for one, and we can set up a ward, which is really perfect. We need this ward to stop any kind of Radiant. So as long as they don't have a puppet in hand right now, that should be fine. Now we can just kind of go as wide as we want. And since we don't have anything valuable, may as well throw it away, get a whole new hand, and work from there. This game goes a fair bit longer than I was expecting for game 1, to be honest. But it was definitely of interest. So they're still in resonance. They decided to go face, which means they're going to deck out now. We don't even need to bother striking them in the face, when they're just literally going to deck their turn. Actually, I don't think there would have been many ways to avoid that, other than sending the 4-3, of course, into the 1, setting themselves up, but that probably would have been it, so good on them. The second match for this video is going to be against Rune. Rune has been still pretty all over the place. I mean, mostly Mysteria Rune, but I've seen some changes up with some more spell boost focused ones, and of course some Earth Rune. No shock there, since both of those decks seem to be rising in popularity even just a little bit. And they start off with what would probably be considered the ideal play, the Mysteria Knowledge. If they have any kind of Mysteria cards, like Anne or Mage, then we could be in some trouble. There is the Missile. So again, back-to-back Mysteria cards, so you can't really go too wrong with those. And we are going first, which does make it a little harder to use Omen if we end up getting it. The Conjure Golem isn't really an issue. But we can set up quite a nice board, go on a little bit more of the aggressive style. Although this Adorable Genius is quite frustrating, and I've seen that card played a lot more lately. Must have been in some of the more popular meta decks. Windblast, pretty decent trade-offs overall. But obviously not perfect. So we can go for white, a little bit of trade, and then just a little bit to the 2-2 there. A little cheap Fate's Hand and a Magic Missile. Interesting. And a Wind Blast. Great. Exactly what you want to see. Although actually, more removal's pretty fine. We don't really have anything else to play out now, since I don't really want 2 destruction and whites in my hand. And it looks like they don't have a lot either, so that's definitely a little more interesting. At least we are going to flood the board very easily. If they manage to deal with this, drops our destruction in white down to 4. And if they don't, we're still pretty set up. So a nice little trade. And just another one, kind of setting us up nicely to go for Destruction in Black as early as possible. Since we're not really worried about the Deus Ex Machina until we get black onto the board. They haven't really played anything too crazy yet, which is a little bit of an advantage. I mean, we haven't seen any kind of other Mysteria cards, so it looks like they were a more spell boost orientated deck. The hard part's telling the difference, because of course the Mysteria decks and the Rune decks are very similar in the way that spell boost and Mysteria play out, at least in the early game. So, a cheap Destruction in Black. And we take a little bit of damage. I did plan out that the worst that we could probably get dealt was going to be 9 damage. The odds of them having what they would have needed to kill us was a little bit lower, so definitely not bad. Now we have a chance to go pretty much all in. The only real risk is if they have Anne or anything like that, or Truth Adjudication. Luckily, not boosted a lot, so we ended up getting a nice little odds there. That's the only problem with Truth, you don't know where it's going to go. So this deck was a fair bit of fun, it definitely does an alright job. One Neapolitan Amulet does a nice job to deal with things, and everything else kind of supports the Omen or the Deus Ex Machina strategy. They're definitely the two you're aiming for. You really need to pick those in the reasonable early game to decide which strategy to focus on more, where you're going to spend your evos, and how you're going to play out the match, as if you try and do both at the same time, it obviously becomes a mess. You really want to pick which one you're going down immediately going into the match. Once you see the first probably 2 or 3 cards played from your opponent, you really want to know exactly which one. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, hit like button and subscribe. You'll find the deck list in the description below. Until next time, see ya.